Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Natalie. This is Scientology Life After a Cult, where I share my 35 years in Scientology, growing up in Scientology, three generations of my family in Scientology, and how we all got out. If you're here for the first time, I'd love it if you subscribe. And if you've been here before, make sure you hit the subscribe button and like the video. I would absolutely love that. Welcome to everybody in the chat. And if you're catching this on the live stream, make sure you participate. This is a participation. I want to hear what you think. I want to hear where you're listening from and any questions that you have as well. Because it also helps me come up with guys, I have so many things that I want to talk about after 35 years of not talking about a lot of things that sometimes it's hard to narrow it down. But based on your questions, I'm able to do that more. Hey, Nancy, Alicia, pause for Andrea. Always good to see you there. I have got what I think is a very fun topic. This is something I've been thinking about a lot. And it has everything to do with some really good examples of a lack of emotional intelligence. We're going to talk a little bit about what that is. I'm by no means an expert, but I know how to use the Google machine. And there are things that I try to learn about and understand more because it helps me understand what happened growing up in Scientology and my time in the Sea Organization and all of that. And it's really cool for me to get at least a basic understanding of what emotional intelligence is, how it can be improved or nurtured, and the opposite, how it can actually be stunted and how that affects people. And we're going to talk about a few very good examples of that. Divinely Me, you're catching your first live. Yay, I'm so excited. Mastiff Mom, 2 in 1 day. I'm going to do more lives in the morning as well because I've got some stuff going on, great things going on work-wise, but yeah, I think I want to do that. I'm going to do some degree of both of them. Hey, Rachel, Genty, so great to see you guys. Now, if any of you two are more, which you very well probably for sure are, know if you have any thoughts on this concept of emotional intelligence or any books or even anything that you would help increase my understanding of it, I would love to learn more about that too. Because, like I said, the more I learn and understand about just how we all work, how people work, it helps me to process what happened for 35 years. Now, I want to talk about this because, as many of you know, there is this whole TikTok crowd, including Scientology Audit, Streets LA, William Good out at the Scientology Testing Center in Hollywood. And we've seen some crazy things go down. A Scientologist, a self-described Scientologist, identified himself as a Scientologist, blew his nose on William and got right in his face. And then last night, there's a Scientology operative who was arrested after spitting at William. We've seen Scientologists out there with their phones videotaping, but not interacting and communicating, just kind of robotically standing there with their video camera. Just very bizarre and strange behavior. And honestly, even by Scientology standards, take my word on that. Even by Scientology standards, some of this behavior is next level. It's strange, it's bizarre, and I think it has a lot to do with a lack of emotional intelligence in Scientology, and that actually being stunted. Love Maddie, I do love Liz Gale. I do. I actually, yeah, I'm getting caught up on her content. I love her videos on TikTok and what she's doing. I think she's fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Right. So let's talk a little bit about emotional intelligence and what I found on the Google machine. Um, I'm just going to read this. It just from a, I have notes. I have notes, people. So emotional intelligence is talked about as this dynamic skill that can be developed through self-reflection and effort And there are all kinds of factors that can affect this. And this is what we're going to talk about, what these factors are that affect emotional intelligence and how Scientology gets in the way with that. Because this was mind blowing for me. Jean, thank you for that info. Let's see. I'm probably going to say this wrong. Jean, Google anhedonia and dithemia. I was in a cult and diagnosed with these and PTSD, chronic and anxiety disorder. Oh, I'm really glad that you got out of your cult, and I'm definitely going to check this out. That sounds very interesting. And sorry that that happened. Um, I'm interested in. I'd love to know what cult, if that's okay. You don't have to answer that by any means. My email is natalie@tonkatalk.com if you don't want to, share that publicly. I'm just always curious because obviously I come from a cult background, a multi-generational cult background, and I'm always interested in how people in their cult, whether it's an actual cult or could be an abusive relationship, a high control group of some sorts, another church, stuff like that. Oh, you say all good. I'm full of life and happy. I love that. I love that. Me too. Joanna, I'm so glad that you made it to alive. Here we are. So we're talking about emotional intelligence and how it's a skill that can be developed. But to do that, you need to be able to have some self-reflection. And there's a lot of factors that go into actually nurturing this ideal of emotional intelligence. And one of them is emotional awareness. This is really interesting to me. It helps you solve problems by being aware of many sides of a situation. It can also help you focus on positive aspects and reduce the intensity of negative emotions. So let's break this down from the viewpoint of Scientology. And you grew up in Scientology or you're an adult in Scientology. How do you solve problems if you cannot see the other sides to a situation? Because remember, emotional awareness is said to be a skill that helps you solve problems by being aware of many sides of a situation. So if we unpack that from the standpoint of being a Scientologist, I'll use myself as an example. Growing up in Scientology and being indoctrinated as a Scientologist, being aware of many sides of a situation is not something that is workable in Scientology because that would involve being able to see something from a different point of view. And in Scientology, you're very indoctrinated to have one point of view. And that point of view is the point of view of L. Ron Hubbard, the point of view of Scientology, the point of view of David Miscavige. Before David Miscavige, it was just L. Ron Hubbard, and now it's pretty much both because David Miscavige, the dictator of Scientology, has set it up that way so that he is, right there next to L. Ron Hubbard as far as importance in Scientology goes. After that, of course, would be Tom Cruise, at least in Tom Cruise's mind. So picture this, right? You've been indoctrinated to only see things through one lens from one point of view. That is the only way. You're indoctrinated in Scientology to believe there is one way, and that's L. Ron Hubbard's way, and that is the only way. So how can you appreciate a different point of view or see it from a different way if the whole mind control involves having you see it only the way that L. Ron Hubbard or Scientology wants you to see it? Anon, I do think how they acted was a lack of emotional intelligence. Right, exactly. The people I know who would do that stuff outside the Scientology building, which I wouldn't, they are the ones who have conditional affection. Yep, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. It really, I think, helps understand the mentality and the mindset of a Scientologist when you look at it that way. If emotional awareness involves seeing something from another point of view, and you're not allowed to do that, like ever, Maybe you see it from your point of view, but then you're moved over to see it from Scientology's, but you don't even entertain any others. How can you have emotional awareness? The other one is empathy, the ability to understand how other people think and feel about a situation or a person. Understanding how someone else feels can help you decide how to help them. So let's unpack that. It's the ability to understand how other people think and feel about a situation or a person. And when you understand how someone feels, you can help them. You can decide how to help them. So let's think about the situation that's unfolding on Hollywood Boulevard with all the TikTok people out there and live streamers and William Good from Scientology Audit Streets LA. They they're facing people who are stunted when it comes to this emotional intelligence. How can anyone in Scientology, or even let's talk about the body routers, because that's what so Sebastian, Angel, anyone who goes out to bring people in for a personality test or to see a film is called a body router in Scientology. So you're there to get them to come in because you already have pre-decided you're going to sell them a book or you're going to sell them this course. You don't know what their issues are. There's no way at that point you could have any empathy because you're not trying to understand how they think beyond using it to manipulate the situation and get them to buy a book or do a course in Scientology. So you see how that works? They're out there. Body routing is what it's called in Scientology. And side note, I don't know if you guys know this. I think I've shared it before. In Scientology, they refer to their bodies or our meat bodies, which just sounds so gross. Meat bodies. And so people who are new to Scientology, they refer to as raw meat. That's so gross, isn't it? Raw meat. When I was in Scientology on my best day, I was never comfortable with that terminology. Specifically, that raw meat just sounded disgusting. But yeah, meat bodies. L. Ron Hubbard talked a lot about having a meat body. We have meat bodies. Oh my God, I'm just grossed out saying it. But if you're new to Scientology, you are raw meat. That's how they think of you, raw meat. So these people, these body routers, people from the test center are going out to get people in to sell them the Scientology books, courses, and whatnot. So if empathy, right? If you're going to have emotional intelligence and you need empathy, which is the ability to understand how other people think and feel, and also and to use that to decide how to help them. The only thing, Joanna, I'm with you. I'm totally cringing too. I'm like on the inside, I want to throw up. It's so gross. Raw meat. Ew, ew, ew. I got to stop saying it. Or do I need to keep saying it because I have a button on it? So lacking that empathy, you're not thinking about, hey, I mean, they do find out what's bothering a person in their life. That's called finding their ruin. So again, if you're a Scientologist and you're recruiting, your number one thing you need to do is find that person's ruin. You need to find out what's ruining their life. And if you can do that with the help of this personality test, and they train to do this, by the way, they train, they practice, they drill it, going through a personality test to find what is ruining somebody's life. And then you show them this is how Scientology can help you. Katie Anthony, thank you so much. We love you, Nat. Thank you for everything. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I just run my mouth. You guys are really like with the good feedback and questions and so super supportive. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, escaping the cultiverse, flatten the button. Ooh, maybe I should put that on a sweatshirt. Flatten the button. Okay, so I think you're kind of like there's a theme here with this lack of emotional intelligence. Scientologists aren't allowed to have this empathy. When you train, let's if any of you have been in therapy with a therapist or a psychiatrist, psychologist, anything, even a life coach, When you sit down to communicate, if it's a good one, right? There's this level of empathy, genuine curiosity, and opening up of their ears and eyes to listen, to really understand what's going on with you. Then you can have some dialogue, right? You could figure out, maybe get to the bottom of these problems. What Scientologists are trained to do, whether they're staff members or C organization members working with new people, like I said, is to find out what's ruining their lives. So the only curiosity that they're using is just to get to this, find what's ruining their lives. It's very robotic. It's not done from a point of, hey, let's go through this personality test. It looks like, there's some good things here. There's some things that might need work, but let me get to know you a little bit. It's like, this doesn't happen. They're trained to kind of zero in. And if you don't have something that you feel is ruining your life, they will still try to convince you that something is. Case in point, the couple the other night that was on one of William Good's videos, where the woman went in and did a personality test. And during her evaluation for it, she was in disagreement that her life was so horrible and that she needed Scientology. And they just kept hammering her and hammering her and hammering her. And I thought that was so interesting because, again, it's not about helping the person. It's not about helping her. It's about selling a book or selling a Scientology course or selling Dianetics auditing. This is what they're trained to do. Now, many of the reasons why they do it, they're Sea Org members and staff members in Scientology don't really, you're not getting paid. The perks are horrible, if non-existent. So many of them are there because they do want to help people. But this is the problem. And this is kind of the joke in the whole thing. That gets trained out of you. Because when you're training to do these jobs, when you're training to become a Scientology counselor or auditor, as it's called in Scientology, the very first thing they have you do, one of the very first things, and you do it multiple times in your Scientology career, are, and we talk about this on the channel a lot, training routines or TRs. And it trains you to be very robotic in your answers, which is so ironic because when you read about it, when you're doing it, it's supposed to kind of be the opposite. It really seems like it, but to pass and to perform in a way that's acceptable so you can move on, it's not like that. You need to repeat the approved phrase. You need to use the approved words. You're just basically, you're not really truly communicating with that person. If you've ever seen somebody get a Dianetics auditing session where they take the Dianetics book and they have you locate a time where you had physical or emotional pain and they run you through the incident, they want you to contact what you see, what you hear, what you smell. You'll notice from session to session, if you see these, the wording is the same. Okay, go back to the beginning of the incident and blah, 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 blah. They're just repeating what was in the book because that's the expectation. That's completely the expectation in Scientology. You're just there to parrot what L. Ron Hubbard said, not actually, be like, hey, what's going on with you? So how can they have that level of empathy that would be needed to have emotional intelligence? Another one that's stunted in Scientology, and if you're just jumping in, we're talking about emotional intelligence, how it's lacking in many Scientologists and why. Social skills. The ability to effectively speak and relate to others in a social setting. It enables you to handle pressure and frequently, be able to collaborate with people, right? This is a skill that many people need, are these social skills. And take a look at what's happening outside that Hollywood testing center. It would be such an opportunity, instead of just going at somebody or just responding in a way with anger and animosity. Why couldn't they be just curious and maybe ask any of the people who are there live streaming, hey, what's up? Why are you guys doing this? Things like that, but be genuinely curious, not attacking them about it. You look at the way that on his videos, how William will handle people in terms of educating them about Scientology. but very calmly explaining why he's there, why other people are there, and also what's needed from them. Keep the sidewalks clear. Don't block the door. Do not touch a Scientologist. They are trying to bait you into allowing them, giving them a reason to weaponize the police. So you compare that to what Scientology, the ways they've chose to respond to all of this happening. And you see who has emotional intelligence and who does not. The Scientologist who showed up screaming, ranting, raving, and then blowing his nose on William, I would say he lacks emotional intelligence. To the guy last night, the Russian guy from Scientology who spit on William and got arrested, lacks emotional intelligence. Who does that? And I don't even know if that guy last night was even, was hired by Scientology or actually was a Scientologist. I kind of feel like he's probably somebody hired. Generally, what Scientology does is they have lawyers who hire private investigators, who hire other private investigators, or they even have used people who are homeless in the area to cause trouble. That's kind of what they do. Joanna's got a question. In your opinion, under those circumstances, can people have real connections or true friendships in Scientology? It's very hard. It's very difficult because there's such a culture of snitching on each other and reporting each other. Because if you're having doubts and thoughts of leaving Scientology and you're just conflicted about it and you want to talk to your BFF, so you go get some coffee and you're like, I'm just not feeling it. These are the feelings I'm having about Scientology and I'm considering leaving. That rarely, if ever, happens because there's such a fear that the person I'm confiding in, who I'd hope would have some empathy and a willingness to hear me, some understanding, this would require that person to be thinking with emotional intelligence. And they don't. As soon as they hear, I have doubts about Scientology, their training and their indoctrination comes forward. I saw this happen with my daughter Shelby when I got her out of Scientology. She was training in Florida to be a staff member here in the Twin Cities. And I had to get her out. My ex-husband helped me. We sent her to Mexico with him to get her away for a while and then helped her decompress, got her some medical care. But in the process, until the brainwashing calmed down and kind of slid away, she thought that I was ruining her life and Christmas because it happened around Christmas time when I got her out. And she was trained, and they had warned her ahead of time that, we think your mom's kind of drifting away. In Scientology, they call it becoming disaffected. So she was kind of prepped for potential, me kind of coming at her about Scientology. Her reaction, I could tell when I was talking to her about some of the things that are really happening in Scientology, you could see that Scientology training come right in. And I knew I wasn't talking to my daughter. I was talking to the Scientology training. I couldn't get through to her. She needed more time to decompress, to get some good food, sleep. She needed time to get out of that constant fight or flight before I could even communicate with her, because she wasn't yet even emotionally available to have the conversation, because the indoctrination in Scientology is so strong to not listen to a different point of view, especially if it's contrary to Scientology. And what made a big difference with my daughter was one of Scientology's front groups is they claim to support human rights and use the Declaration of Human Rights, which wasn't written by them. I forget exactly where. I think it was the UN or someplace. There's this Declaration of Human Rights, which have all these human rights on them. And Scientology took this and tried to use it for public relations. Yet they're the worst when it comes to human rights. They are literally a human trafficking cult. So one of the biggest ways I got through to my daughter is I asked her about some of the things that had happened to her when she was training in Florida. And I said, okay, so let's talk about when you were deprived of food because you didn't make certain quotas, sales quotas, things that weren't even her job. She was there to be a course room supervisor. But when she would finish training at night at 10 o'clock at night, They would put her and other students, other staff members, into the call center, and they would start calling Scientologists who were in different time zones to sell them the basic books in Scientology, donate to this, donate to that. It was mainly selling Scientology books at that time because David Miscavige decided that they were all crap and he was just going to redo them, and all Scientologists had to rebuy them. What a great scam. And it's still going on now to this day. So I was telling my daughter, look, Shelby, being deprived of food, you could only have rice and beans, being sleep deprived as punishment, being made to clean bathroom floors and bathrooms because you didn't make a sales quota when that's not even your job. These I just went through these things with her, and then I read her parts of the Declaration of Human Rights, which I knew was important to her. And I told her, I said, I want to hold in your mind. I want you to hold in your mind what happened to you with these specific situations, which she had already told me about, but she was still struggling because so much in Scientology, especially in the C organization or when you're a staff member, you think you deserve what's happening to you. It is no different than any other abusive relationship where sometimes you're so emotionally and spiritually beaten down and told, why do you make me so mad? Why do you make me do this? I don't want to do this. You're making me do it. That's kind of the way that Scientology operates, especially with C organization members. So my daughter didn't even see these things as being abusive. And to be honest, I didn't see a lot of these things as being abusive when I was in Scientology. And it was this Declaration of Human Rights which kind of got through to her, and kind of you could see, like, I could see her coming back. Like, oh. That was when, like, I really knew she would be okay. Because for, oh gosh, weeks, I think it only really took, I mean, honestly, I think it just took a couple of weeks. You could tell it wasn't her that was responding. And so in that moment, I knew that I was talking to her. And once I could communicate with her, then it was just a matter of time. And that is how it went and how it happened. Thank you, chemist. He's like, let it out. Um, so imagine people like Angel, Sebastian, the different people are there, the different people in Scientology who don't recognize how this emotional intelligence is, one, important, and secondly, how it's being suppressed right out of you in Scientology, how it's being completely suppressed. And they don't know it, because when you're in that constant state of fight or flight, you're not thinking in those terms. You're just trying to survive, and you have put so much trust in Scientology, in L. Ron Hubbard. You have dedicated 1 billion years, if you're a C organization member, to forwarding the aims of Scientology. Escaping the cultiverse says crying too, remembering those days. I know. I know. I'm sorry to make you cry, but let it out. So you see how it just really hit me today how it fosters this situation of a lack of emotional intelligence with Scientologists. So, of course, they think it's okay to go out there and spit at people and just be like super, all this negative energy, and stand out there with your angry face with your camera and just stare at people while videotaping them, but not actually communicating with them. Scientology claims to have the solutions to make the planet a world where there's no crime, a world where there's no war. They can't even provide that within the organization. If the culture within the organization, and we know this to be true, is one that is abusive, that's keeping people in fight or flight, that is demanding and causing everyday parishioners to go bankrupt because of the demands on them financially, and then wanting to take their children to put them into the C organization. It's just, Where do you have the bandwidth to look at another human being and go, "Oh, I see you and you can see me." And I think that's the big thing in Scientology. When you're in Scientology, the indoctrination to not be you, and the irony is all over. I mean, think about the bridge to total freedom, which is Scientology's chart of levels of all the things you can do in Scientology, to total freedom. And I've said this before, it's not. It is the bridge to empty pockets. It is the bridge to destroyed families. It is the bridge to being just mentally just struggling. And I feel like there's so much of it is tied to not letting that emotional intelligence grow. Because when I left Scientology over the last 13 years, and especially the last couple of years, the biggest thing I've learned has to do with emotional intelligence. Not only is it good to have empathy for people and be willing, you may not agree, but how do you know if you agree or not if you don't hear them out? Be willing to hear what could be an opposing point of view. I was so, after a while, in leaving a cult, I feel like it often comes off in layers. And I was so passionate about the idea of not believing in one way of thinking when I left Scientology, that, and I still do today, which is why I'm so curious about people and love. I want to know everything about a stranger because I'm genuinely curious about it because I was never allowed to be before. Think of like how the type of people that this creates and why you hear this a lot on when you're watching this live streaming in front of the Hollywood Testing Center. They talk about the eyes, the Scientology eyes, the spooky eyes. And it's so blank. They're so, the Scientologists who were out there doing videos, the ones who you could see their eyes, it's just blank because that's what they're trained to do, is be void of emotion, empathy, understanding, not practicing emotional intelligence at all. And that is the result. That is what you get. And then they create all of these situations with people because they're acting like fools and think that that's okay. Now, a lack of emotional intelligence is obviously not something that is just a Scientology thing. We see it all over the place. So somebody can totally be crap in the bed when it comes to emotional intelligence and have never been in a cult or been in Scientology. The difference is, though, it's almost like this is a goal in Scientology. To keep somebody trapped in Scientology, you would need to make sure that they don't have the ability, or it's so suppressed that they don't do it, to question, to think, to be curious, to want to see something from another point of view. And then it just perpetuates that same cycle of abuse. And then you start seeing it as normal. Well, like my example with my daughter, Shelby. It didn't seem like punishment to her when they were denied food and had to eat only rice and beans, or the sleep deprivation, or the manual labor punishment for not making quotas that had nothing to do with her job. She didn't see that as being abusive because it was presented in a way that, well, this is a consequence because you didn't do that and you deserve this. You deserve to be treated that way. So you're not nurturing any level of empathy. And I've shared before, growing up, one of my biggest fears when I left Scientology was that I really was an asshole, that was who I was, that it wasn't just Scientology. Now, of course, I've done some asshole things in my life, and I can't blame it all on Scientology. But what I started finding out is, no, that's not who I am. And that is the part of me that was being suppressed in Scientology, my curiosity, my desire to want to understand where somebody else was coming from. And so today I'm so far the other way that, I'm like, you do you, short of it hurting anybody. I mean, what is it on me if you choose to practice a certain religion, as long as people aren't being hurt, stalked, harassed like in Scientology? Wanderer, is it hard to have empathy now? No, because I found out that empathy, it's this is my reality of what I experience and how I feel about it, is that I feel like we all have these seeds within us when we're kids, and you can water and nurture any of them. And some could be seeds of empathy and compassion, and other ones could be of more robotic and going after people and being ruthless and at all costs. Scientology, Scientology, Scientology. It's always about the group first in Scientology. And the further I got away from that, and the biggest way I learned that was through other people, spending time with people not in Scientology. So many people had so much more empathy and compassion than I had ever experienced in my life. And even now, all of you, it's just mirrored back all the time. And I was able to see that there's a whole world out there of people who actually have compassion, who have empathy and who encourage that in other people, where it's okay because you made a mistake, where doing your best is still appreciated, which is so funny because that's not something you will hear in Scientology. You've done your best and that is good enough. I can't even get it out with a straight face because that is not how they roll. Your best isn't good enough. It's about doing it exactly how L. Ron Hubbard said that you should do it. Thank you for so much, Jamie Casper. Hit the like button and subscribe. Natalie has great knowledge. Show her some appreciation. I appreciate that. I'm telling you. It's going to take, I look at it this way. I'm 53 years old now, 35 years in Scientology. I would have been out longer by the time I'm about 70. I don't think I will ever run out of things to talk about and to share in that way. So I think that when you see people leave Scientology or when they start having doubts, I realize this. Some of the first things that start to happen is that compassion starts coming out. So I feel like most people probably have it, but it's just something that's not nurtured when you grow up in Scientology, and it's definitely not nurtured in the Sea organization. We didn't grow up like with where we'd get hurt and we'd get a hug, or my mom would, kiss an owie. We had to do what are called contact assist in Scientology, where if you hurt yourself, you just touch it back to whatever you banged it or how you hurt it, and it's supposed to make the pain blow. I think in the time that it took to do this, that the pain just would have gone away anyways because you stubbed a toe or whatever you did. Um, but in fact, I asked my sister not long ago, my sister Lana, who's been on my channel, and I'm like, I just realized growing up how much we lacked that physical touch and hugs, and it's okay. And I'm like, I just assumed you got it all because you were mom's favorite. And she told me, she said, no. She said, I wasn't really getting it either. My mom was doing the best that she could do in the circumstances that she was in she was in a cult. She was being brainwashed. She did not have that example growing up with parents that would have fostered that in her either. And they weren't in a cult. So it's, again, this is not something I know that is limited to Scientology or the cult experience, but I think it helps to explain what we're seeing play out in Scientology. Part of emotional intelligence is also regulation of emotion. So the ability to understand and control your emotions. And it said that people with low emotional intelligence often struggle to regulate their emotions. We're really seeing this play out. I mean, that guy that lost his mind the other night on Hollywood Boulevard at the Hollywood Testing Center that tried to blow his nose or blew his nose on William, definitely not controlling his emotions. Now, I suspect that he was either under the influence of something or suffering from some type of mental illness because it was so extreme. But if he was with Scientology, like, why was nobody helping him too from Scientology? Where was the security guard then? This guy's obviously hurting. Something's going on with him. And instead, they had the door shut and then just went on. And we're videotaping it from the inside as well. It's really fascinating when you think about it in these terms of emotional intelligence, regulating your emotions. The guy right? The Russian Scientology operative who spit on William. How hard is it to just not do that? You know? How hard is it really? It the reaction from Scientology is so overblown. It's so negative because they attack. That's what they're trained to do. Is they see questions about Scientology or L. Ron Hubbard or David Miscavige as an attack because they're indoctrinated to believe questioning is not okay. Questioning will get them in trouble. So anyone coming at them with questions, they see that's an attack. You're attacking Scientology. Really? Because we're just out there asking, hey, this whole stuff with David Miscavige beating his staff, coerced abortions in the Sea Organization, sleep deprivation, food deprivation, human trafficking, moving people around, covering up sexual assault. You can go on and on and on and on. Maybe stop doing it. Because you know what? You can still do your Scientology auditing if you want to. You can still read your L. Ron Hubbard books if you want to, but maybe knock out the other stuff. Like this doesn't occur to them because they're so indoctrinated that this type of abuse and treatment is normal, is desirable, is the way to be because the cult leader was that way, is that way with David Miscavige. So, Chopper, you're right. I would compare Scientology to be similar to Stockholm Syndrome. Yeah, very much so. Vera says, I recommend Cults to Consciousness. I love her channel. Their channel is about multiple calls where they are discussing coercive control. Gosh, so true. I need to listen to more of that. I've been so obsessed with watching all the live streams in front of the Hollywood Testing Center. I have so much to catch up on. Susie, you're not late. On time is when you get here. So I'm glad that you're here. If you're catching this on the replay, I want to see in the comments what you think about this because it's really just blown my mind. So regulating your emotions. That's the last one we talked about. Interpersonal management is what this one's called. Interpersonal skills such as self-esteem and stress management greatly influence emotional intelligence. Okay, so interpersonal skills, having self-esteem, stress management, being able to manage your stress greatly influences emotional intelligence. Is there any place in Scientology that you've seen where managing your stress is even a thing? No, it's not. Because especially if you are higher up on the bridge to total freedom, the expectation is that you don't talk about the problems that you have because you're supposed to be this perfect free being. You don't talk about the troubles that you are having because you're supposed to be this perfect free being. So there's indoctrination that occurs even with people not in the Sea Organization or staff members, but everyday Scientologists that involves convincing them of this, that managing stress isn't a thing. It's the solution is more Scientology. You need to do your next step in Scientology. You need to read more L. Ron Hubbard in Scientology. Jamie's asking, why do people leave and then choose to go back? Is it because they can't cope emotionally outside of Scientology? That is such a good question. And I've seen it happen. In fact, my reoccurring nightmare, which thankfully I don't have as much anymore, is that people from the Sea Org come to get me because that's what they used to do is if you took off, you blew, as they called it, they'd actually go after you. That they come to get me and they chase me and that I actually do go back. That's the worst part of the nightmare is not the chasing. That's bad too. But it's that I decide to go back. Oh my gosh. I can feel so much anxiety here right now, just even talking about that dream. So your question, Jamie, is super spot on. Why do people leave and then choose to go back? And then you said, is it because they can't, cope emotionally outside of Scientology? I think that's part of it. I really do. There are no coping skills and mechanisms that are truly helpful in the real world, because the only solution is to, look for that suppressive person, which just makes you paranoid. Or, what's the alternative? You can't have a conversation to gain understanding to overcome what's happening. All you know is you're supposed to attack somebody if they question you, because a question could just be, "Hey, I'm curious about this. Why are you attacking me? Why are you attacking my religion?" They're like, "Dude, all I did was ask you, what is Scientology?" I mean, that's kind of the level of the response by some. Now, I'm not saying that every single Scientologist is this way. And honestly, so many Scientologists are really good people. They're there because they want to help. They wanted to help. Trust me, the perks aren't great. There's not much of a reason beyond that to want to be there. And that desire to help is manipulated, and they're fed propaganda to believe that they are helping and doing great things out in the world because of these really well done videos that David Miscavige makes and shows to the parishioners at all of these events. It's what they're told. At the Hollywood Testing Center, they're telling people that Shakira benefited from Scientology, that she finds it helpful because Tom Cruise dated her a year ago because they went out, they were seen in public. Maybe he brought her in, maybe he didn't. I don't know the details of it, but that's still being used to manipulate, especially Latino people, into coming into Scientology. It's not true. And when Scientologists hear that, oh, Shakira is now a Scientologist, it makes them feel good because they feel so crappy otherwise. Because who do they got? Tom Cruise. On my best day in Scientology, I thought Tom Cruise's behavior was cringy, which was something I never, never could have admitted while in Scientology. That would have just resulted in all kinds of hurt. James is saying so many brave, strong kids come out of the Church of Scientology cult. That is so true. And unfortunately, many people, kids, adults even, who, when you're leaving Scientology, depending on how much time you spent in, somebody like me growing up in Scientology, you're told that how evil those psychiatrists are. Psychologists, school counselors, oh, you better never go see the school counselor. This fear is instilled within you because psychiatrists are responsible for all the destruction on not just the planet, but on other planets and other lifetimes. L. Ron Hubbard talks about how, I guess there were psychiatrists back there in the Xenu days that is part of it, that they are responsible for this. So there's such a fear around any other place that you might be able to get help for your stress and your anxiety. And in Scientology, they don't call it anxiety. It's they don't acknowledge these things. So there tends to be a lot of undiagnosed mental illness, which then becomes worse and is made worse. And you're just perpetuating then more generations of this way of thinking if you don't break the cycle. Doom, doom, doom. Yeah, exactly, Renee, right? She dated him for a whole minute, and now she's not involved in the Church of Scientology. I wonder why exactly. But now there's this, she's helping Scientology. Juno, where did you go when you left? I was already living in Minnesota. So I had left, like many people like me. You leave in layers. You leave the Sea organization, but you're still going to be a Scientologist. So then you're a Scientology parishioner. And then from there you leave. Whoops. So I was already in Minnesota. I wasn't in the Sea organization anymore. I had left. So I had a place to live and a life outside of that. Um, Lost a bunch of friends and stuff like that, had to find a new dentist because my dentist was a Scientologist and I just did not feel comfortable with him working on me. And to be honest, I didn't want to put him in a position of feeling uncomfortable because I knew as a declared suppressive person that would be, really awkward for him. And frankly, I thought him and his wife were nice people. So I was like, I'm not gonna force that on him, even though I probably could have. Anon makes a good point. And you're also told to not self list as a child. So you're told not to try and figure things out for yourself and wait for auditing sessions. That is an excellent point. To self list means to sit there and come up with a list of all the things that might be wrong with you or that are wrong with you or what those reasons could be. You were indoctrinated to not do that outside of Scientology auditing because that way you're like, oh, well, I need to go in session. I need my Scientology auditing because I, need to figure this out. You're not allowed to do that outside of that. So you don't stop and actually think. I mean, even today, after 13 years out of Scientology, one of my favorite things to do is just sit around and think. Just sit around and contemplate different things and talk about it if I can. And that's because you're not allowed to do that in Scientology. You're not allowed to not only question, you're not allowed to really look within. And when we were talking about one of the first things that would help or harm emotional intelligence, it's the ability to be able to look within and to be able to have self-esteem. So you see how those things are tied together and it just ends up perpetuating this very robotic non-connection with the world around many Scientologists, which when you think about it, it's kind of the whole scam. Because if you create this echo chamber within Scientology where you're only surrounded by people who approve of you doing Scientology, well, then you're never really going to step out of line because you're surrounded by people who are supporting that and only that as the way until you get one foot out the door. New York City facts. How do you feel about the fruit lady going into the Scientology building? The fruit lady, the fruit lady. Oh, to use the bathroom. Vendors on the street have used the bathroom in there to use the bathroom. You know what? At least they're letting her do that. And this is something that they're doing to make friends with the vendors in the hopes that they'll have their back, which they obviously, I don't think do. I think, good. I mean, if she's got to use a bathroom, she's got to use a bathroom. I don't know what other options are, but my understanding is that's what she's doing is they go in there to use the bathroom. Hey, peekaboo. I just love all this. Love Maddie. When your church tells you not to look, read anything on the internet, etc., that may be critical of them. You should raise the alarm that you're in a cult, you'd think. Exactly. But remember, it's like this is, sometime soon. I need to interview and talk with someone who wasn't raised in Scientology, who was an adult who became a Scientologist and maybe even wasn't in the organization or on staff because I don't know how I would have handled or responded if I'd gotten into Scientology later in life. I think sometimes it's easy to say, well, I would never fall for that or I could never think that way because the way it happens is a real slow boil. And the rules, kind of start off not so bad. And the further you go, the deeper you go into Scientology, the stronger and more severe they get. As you go up through from being a parishioner to maybe a staff member or being the C organization, where it's at the height of ridiculousness. And even in the C organization, the further you go up within that, the rules and things are even more severe and more, I mean, just dumb. Like many of these just makes no sense to people outside of this organization because they don't make sense. But to Love Maddie's point, yeah, if you're not allowed to question or read things that go against, can you imagine working for a company? And maybe this happens, you guys tell me, and you're not allowed to read or be introduced to anything about their competitors. You're not allowed to, maybe you work for a restaurant, you're not allowed to go to another restaurant and try the food. You can only eat that restaurant's food. You can only look at that restaurant's menu. You can only bring your friends to that restaurant. You should not be joining them at other restaurants. It's like that. But it's, your church or cult. And Scientology does not have a monopoly on that. There are some other ones too that are the same way that way. And that's why I think it's so important to have that open mind, which having an open mind in Scientology is a bad thing. Be willing to hear somebody out, whether you agree with them or not. What's wrong with hearing it? What's wrong with even trying to see it from their point of view? Doesn't mean you agree, but you might be able to understand how they got there. And if you can understand how they got there, even if you don't disagree, you might be able to have a conversation that's still productive, or at a minimum not hurtful, not making less of somebody. You can be kind. Renee says, and they get to tell you what is wrong and find more ways to charge you to fix you. Completely. That's what the personality test is all about. And by the way, those aren't limited to new people, to raw meat, as they're called, coming into Scientology. Scientologists do those personality tests after pretty much every major step on the bridge to total freedom. They're doing those personality tests. They're redoing those IQ tests. They're redoing the aptitude tests. And don't even get me started on that, because they like to claim, they say you actually cannot raise IQ, but Scientology raises IQ. Scientology raises people's aptitude, raises their graph on the personality test, and they'll show you and tell you this. Well, yeah, if you give somebody the same test over and over and over again, they start figuring out what the answers are if they got it wrong before. And they've done it enough times that they can maybe even remember the questions, and in between, maybe go look it up and find out what those answers are. It's not because of what they're actually doing in Scientology. It's because they're using the same metrics over and over and over again without changing the test. It's it's uncanny. It's so ridiculous in that way, and that's one of the things that that is used in Scientology. Well, look how much my IQ improved. So surely it's this auditing that I'm getting. It's the training that I'm doing. No, it's because you've been taking that IQ test since you were 10 years old. And it's the same test over and over and over again after every major service. Or when you're a Sea organization member, it gets given to you. If you're going to do another job, you have to redo all of those tests again, depending on the job, because those tests will help determine your position in Scientology as well. Teresa from the Mitten, oh my God, that is such Midwestern 50s parenting. Elron borrowed from lots of places. He just always went darker. I don't know what his parents did to him, but it was bad. Yeah, he's taken a ton from other religions, beliefs, philosophies, black magic, you name it. And I found my experience in Scientology is the things that helped me, the things that I actually found helpful and useful, were universal truths you could find in many other places, other religions, self-help books, or even things you might realize while you're in therapy. That is part of just such the BS of the whole thing. It's just all part of the lie. And I'm so glad you guys are here for all this, because the more I talk about it, the more I'm just able to see a lot of what happened. One, see it for what it really was. Because in part of leaving Scientology, there's a lot of things that I didn't even realize. Just like my daughter, I was telling you earlier, right? She didn't think certain things were abusive because she was still under that mind control. Separate her out, she was able to understand that and see that they're outright human rights violations and abuses. And the more you can do that, the more that you can get that understanding outside of Scientology of what these things are. Because remember, especially if you were raised, growing up in Scientology like I did, you're not exposed. We definitely weren't even allowed to go see a school counselor. You're not exposed to different ways of dealing with things, or resources, or different points of view. So you just have the one. They try and keep a monopoly on it, and that's part of how they keep you there. Eddie, thank you. HBO needs to make a Scientology show. I agree. I really do. Something that's it's I feel like there's many things that are very, very serious, but some of it is just so hilarious that sometimes I think that might almost be more effective with Scientologists. Because sometimes they're indoctrinated to be logical in ways, but only in terms of being logical with what L. Ron Hubbard says. Chris is asking, can you please explain what patter drilling is? Oh, patter drilling. Patter drills are when you take an L. Ron Hubbard policy, directive, or bulletin on how to do something, and you have it, and you're just reading it to a wall over and over and over again. And often there are drills where you have to learn something word for word. You have to be able to repeat it back verbatim. And I'm talking about pages of stuff. I don't know how I did that because I don't know, maybe I was better at it then, but these days I'm like, I couldn't even tell you what I had for breakfast, let alone remember 2 pages of anything. But I could back then, just like how I don't know if you guys saw the video I did with Aaron on growing up in Scientology. He can still do the alphabet backwards. My daughter Shelby can do it too. I learned it. I cannot do it. I had to let some of that stuff go to make room in the hard drive of my brain for other things, much more pleasant things. Eddie, what is going exterior? So in Scientology, they believe that going exterior is when you're outside of your body. So you can perceive things outside of your body. That's kind of the simple answer to it in Scientology. That's a goal. That's something that Scientology auditing is supposed to result in. Getting outside of your body like that. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. Oh, Joanna, so like astral projecting. No, I mean, I guess it could be. It could be in a way, but not really. There's not, but you could. I mean, it would actually, yeah, it would be the same thing because with astral projecting, which I don't know a ton about, but the idea is you have would it be like a form or something outside of your body? Whoops, and that scared the crap out of me. What is that? You can go places and experience things with your senses and see and all that. So yeah, I think it would be very similar to that. Sassy sister, yeah, like an out of body experience. Teresa says also known as astral travel to non-Scientologists. Yeah, yes, I think it would be in those ways, but those terms were never used in Scientology that I know of. Gunther, has anyone ever died at sea on the trade winds? So on the free winds, oh, I got to remember. I think so. If not there have been deaths as a result of things that have happened on the free winds. But off the top of my head, I cannot say with certainty. Jamie, sorry, really quickly. What is the pyramid and the 4 dynamics of life? The pyramid, you probably mean it's a triangle. And in Scientology, it's called the ARC triangle because it stands for affinity, reality, and communication. If you raise one side, you raise them all. So if we're communicating, right, we're using one side communicating and we're speaking about things that we agree upon. So we have more reality and we're communicating. Our affinity is naturally going to raise for each other. Again, something else that's probably a universal truth that was just codified and used different words for L. Ron Hubbard. That's what that is. The 4 dynamics of life. There are 8 dynamics in Scientology that represent different parts of your life, starting with yourself and then your family, your group, mankind, pets. It goes on and on. Spirituality. 8 is the supreme being, which they don't really get into. I think it's only there so they can say, oh, yeah, we acknowledge that there's a God or supreme being. They really don't. It's only really talked about in reference to these different dynamics. Now, remember, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so and like this video. Let me know too what you think about some morning lives. Mornings are a great time for me. And so I'm thinking of doing more lives in the morning, especially since I wake up and the first thing I have to do is check if Scientology Audit Streets LA has done any videos that I missed when I was staying up too late watching them. So I think I'm going to do that, but let me know what you guys think if you're joining the replay. I want to hear from you in the comments what you think, what we talked about, anything, questions you have, what you want to share. Otherwise, have a great time and go out and have an amazing cult-free day.